What's going on, Tamers? It is me, Guy, getting absolutely destroyed by pollen. Much like fighting Bloom Lord and Hydramon, I'm getting stomped out by plants right now. Now you can see why me and all my homies hate green. You can probably hear it on my nose and my voice a little bit, but I am doing my best to persevere through this so I can bring you guys the very first BT13 Royal Knights deck profile for the set. Now, when the Royal Knights set dropped over here, there were a lot of decks that I was really interested in, but there was one that really caught my eye, and that was Ravemon. Now, Ravemon did get a little bit of support back in EX4, but it wasn't enough to truly make a deck like revolving completely around it. You could combine with other cards, but you couldn't really put it and make it its own archetype. But now with BT13, it's received the rest of the cards that it needs to make a full deck, and it creates a kind of archetype that we've never seen before here in Digimon. Now, before we actually get into the cards and the deck profile itself, I do want to make a quick mention that today's video is going to be a little bit different than what we've done before in the past. I'm making a couple of tweaks to the format and the styling of the deck profile videos, and honestly, I would love you guys to give me a little bit of feedback at the end of the video in the comments below. I want to make these deck profile videos quick, fun, and as easily digestible as possible, and all the changes that you'll see in today's video kind of reflect that. Anyway, let's take a look at BT13's Ravemon, some of the cards in the deck, as well as the game plan and strategy you should have when playing. Let's hop into it. So let's first take a look at some of the pros and cons of the deck. The first pro, honestly, is probably the biggest selling point of why you would even want to run something like this, and that is that because it introduces a brand new archetype to Digimon that we've not seen before, and that is going to be hand control. If you're familiar with other games like Yugioh, for example, then you understand just how powerful hand control as an archetype and how oppressive hand control as an archetype can be, and I think that is no different in the Digimon card game. If you're the kind of person who loves pulling off these like really extravagant combos to like take an advantage over your opponent, then of course purple is probably going to be your archetype, but this deck falls right in line with that. And then finally, as a hand control archetype, it has the really cool side effect that once you get ahead in the game, it's almost impossible to fall behind because you're denying your opponent resources that they so desperately need, and they don't have enough ways to get them. And I want this to be a fair and unbiased deck profile video, so with that said, let's take a look at some of the cons. The first con is that while this deck does have really powerful combos, and it's really hard to fall behind once you're ahead, setting up the board and setting up those combos does take some time. In that time, your opponent can be very aggressive, and it's going to be up to you to be able to stop that aggression and make the play so that you can stabilize and then get your game plan running. And then finally, there are some keyword effects that make this deck's life a living hell, and that is going to be things like Armor Purge and Evade. Cards that have the ability to basically sidestep being destroyed are going to be a little bit problematic. I'm also looking at things like Machine Dramon and Chaos Dramon as well. So now let's actually hop into the cards. As always, we're going to start with our Digi-Eggs, and it's going to be 4 copies of the EX4 Pinamon. And this deck does revolve around being able to build up to your boss monster, then sacrifice him to the Blood Gods. And by doing so, you gain a ton of effects. And one of those is the Pinamon here. You can see that if he's deleted by some other way than battle, you're going to gain a memory. You'll see that a lot of cards in this deck have similar effects to this, where if they're deleted outside of battle, then everything's hunky-dory and you get some really cool effect off of it. Moving on to our level 3s, our first level 3 is going to be 4 copies of an old friend, Skymon from BT3. Now, Pinamon has the restraint that you have to be deleted outside of battle to gain the memory, whereas Skymon does not. So with this guy, you're going to get that one memory whenever the Digimon is deleted, whether it's by battle or not. Next up, we're going to have 4 copies of the EX4 Falcomon. Now this guy's going to be your basic searcher for the deck, being able to grab pretty much any card, any Digimon card in the deck, as well as your Yugioh Tamer. I think in English he's called Keenan Crier or Keenan Krier. What's really nice about this guy though is that his inheritance effect is where you start your hand control, being able to force your opponent to discard a card whenever he's destroyed outside of battle. And our final level 3 for the deck is going to be the BT13 Falcomon just introduced, where on play, he gives one of your Digimon retaliation until the end of the turn, which can be useful in a lot of cases, but I find it not to be so useful unless you're facing out something really big. And there are also just other ways to do this in the deck. We'll take a look at that in a moment. But again, he has the inheritance effect like the previous Falcomon of being able to force your opponent to discard a card whenever he's destroyed outside of battle. So moving on to the level 4s, I think the first thing I need to let you guys know is that as we get into the level 4s, you're going to notice that the splits are going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. But bear with me, there's a very good reason for that, and we'll talk about that more when we get to the cards. But anyway, our first card is going to be the BT13 Peckmon, and this guy's going to have 3 copies in the deck. I mentioned that this deck does have some trouble with aggression, and he's one way to fight against that with just having the blocker ability inherently. And then like the Falcomon before him, on inheritance, when he's deleted, you can trash your opponent's cards in their hand. Our next level 4 is going to be another Peckmon. This one is going to be, again, 3 copies of the EX4 Peckmon. This guy has an effect that we're starting to see more and more in Digimon as time goes on, and that is if you don't have a specific tamer out on the board, whenever you Digivolve into this Digimon, you can just play the tamer for free. And then similarly, again, like his Peckmon brother, he has the same discard effect in inheritance. Again, keep in mind 3 copies of this guy for the deck. Now our next card is actually not going to be from the BT13 set, but was released alongside the BT13 set, and that is going to be 3 copies of the promo Saberdramon. This card does so many things right. It has a bit of an expensive Digivolve cost for level 4, but with both the abilities of Raid and Retaliation, just having this guy in Raising is always a threat to your opponent because they know that at any point you could take this out and just swing at their biggest Digimon and then destroy it. And if that wasn't already enough, its Inheritance allows you to take a red or purple Digimon from your trash and just add it to your hand. I love using this guy to seal off turns. We'll talk about why that is a little bit later when we get to the actual strategy for the deck, but this card is fantastic. Again, 3 of in the deck. And then our final level 4 card for the deck is going to be 1 copy of an old staple, and that's going to be Ginkakumon Promote. I think it's really important for any competitive deck to have like 1 or 2 cards that costs a low amount of memory that you can use to just kind of seal up the game, and Ginkaku Promote with the Rush here is definitely the way to do that for this deck. Alright, so moving on to level 5, this is where things really start to amp up for the deck, and both of the level 5s are going to be the same Digimon but from different sets. So this first one is going to be 4 copies of the EX4 Chromon. What makes this guy so great is that he can attack and then Digivolve on attack into a Ravemon from your hand. You have to pay its cost, but that's fine, we don't worry about that. Which means once you get to your level 5, you've basically gotten to your level 6 for this deck. And once you get to your level 6, you can sacrifice it to the Blood Gods, because they demand a sacrifice of course, and that's how you're going to get your game plan rolling. He also has really good removal on Inheritance, being able to pop a level 5 or lower, and that's always good in case your opponent starts to build up these wide boards. And our next level 5 is actually going to be his brother from the BT13 set. Now this guy has a similar effect. Instead of Digivolving from the hand into a Ravemon, you can Digivolve from the trash into a Ravemon. That's going to be really important because Ravemon is going to cycle from your hand to the field to the trash quite often. So being able to pull him from wherever you might have one is going to be really important for the deck. His Inheritance does allow us to pull a level 4 or lower from the trash and play it on the field. Now you can understand why we might want to have Ginkaku Promote in the deck. Being able to combo off the Ravemon Destruction into a Ginkaku Promote to swing for game is going to be really big. Alright, so finally we're at the level 6s and we have finally reached the star of the deck. And the first one for the level 6 is going to be 4 copies of the EX4 Ravemon. You'll notice he's a little weak at 11k, which means he really can't swing over other Digimon on board at the same level. But he does have jamming, and that is going to be the kicker here. Jamming means that he can reliably swing at your opponent's security without a problem of dying from battle. That means that anything else that would trigger him to be destroyed has to be in effect. And look, if your opponent doesn't destroy you, you can use his own end of attack effect to destroy himself, and then he's going to come back the following turn. Keep in mind that he does need a source card, which means you cannot just keep swinging and destroying him with his own effects. He's going to need some sort of source, so you can build up the stack the first time, destroy your Ravemon, and then bring it back a second time, you'll destroy it, but you can't get the end of attack effect. And then finally, his own deletion effect, and then we see the reappearance of the hand control here again, where if your opponent has 8 or more cards in hand, they have to discard a card, and then after that, if they've got 7 or less, then they have to pull a card from the security and add it to their hand. Alright, our next star for the deck is actually going to be the old Ravemon's brother, and that's going to be the new Ravemon from BT13. This one, only 2 copies, and he's similar, maybe not as potent as the previous one. He doesn't have jamming. He's a little bit stronger though. Is a little bit more expensive on Digivolve, but his end of turn effect is pretty useful. Whereas instead of end of attack, it's the end of the turn, so if he just survives, then you can just blow him up if you want to. And if you do that, then again, like the previous Ravemon, he's going to come back the following turn. But his on deletion effect here, he allows you to play either a Falcomon or a Keenan from your hand or from your trash. So you could, use this guy, swing, and then play something like a Tamer or a Falcomon if you need it. And that brings us to our level 7s. Now, if you've been following the Royal Knights cards or the card reveals for this set, then you know that they introduced the Burst Mode Digimon into this set. And for this deck, it's going to be Ravemon Burst Mode. We're going to have 3 copies of this guy in the deck, and if you have a Keenan Krier on the board and you have your Ravemon on the board, you can Digivolve into this guy by sending the Keenan Krier back to your hand, and then it's a 0 cost for the turn. Keep in mind that at the end of the turn, he is going to have to be discarded off the top of your Ravemon, so it's only going to be a 1-turn thing. Otherwise, you're going to have to spend 5 whole memory to get to him and keep him, which is a little expensive for my taste. Now, he has the ultimate hand control effect, and that is, look at your opponent's hand, choose a card, they have to discard it. And then if they have 7 or less cards in their hand, you get to drop a security too. I don't need to tell you how strong it is knowing what your opponent's hand contains, but being able to take a card and then make them lose that resource is all the more powerful. And if that wasn't enough, whenever he attacks, you can take a card from your opponent's trash, put it at the bottom of their deck, and then all of your opponent's Digimon with the same name, not card number, but the same name, on the field are destroyed. So now that we've taken a look at all of our Digimon for the deck, let's take a look at some of the options and Tamers. Now starting with our options, the first one is going to be one copy of the EX4 Tainted Hero option. Now this card was originally released alongside the Alliance Digimon, the Terriermon deck that was released in EX4. However, it is really useful in this Ravemon deck as well. The main effect here destroys level 3 Digimon, whereas the delay effect allows you to gain memory or force your opponent to discard a card. And because our deck is focusing solely on hand control, being able to get all those really pesky options and Tamers out of their hand is going to be really nice whenever we want them to actually discard Digimon using the things like Falcomon and Peckmon's effects. The other option in the deck is going to be 2 copies of the EX4 Celestial Blade. Now for 4 costs, this card is particularly useful. In cases where you actually cannot destroy your own Ravemon, you can use Celestial Blade to do so and then bring it back the following turn. Also, sometimes it's just nice to have a security card that can screw your opponent over, and Celestial Blade is just good enough for that. Turn of an old favorite, he's cheap, he's useful, and for this deck he is actually cracked, and that is going to be 3 copies of EX1's Analog Youth. Because this deck finds it really useful to have Digimon either in the hand or in the trash, Analog Youth is great because it allows you to get that one card you need for the hand, or discard something to the trash that you might need later on. And where I find that in the past, it was really difficult for a lot of decks to get the secondary effect of Analog Youth's both turns effect off and make it useful for the deck, I think that the Ravemon deck takes advantage of this effect perfectly. Because you're going to be gaining memory even after you Digivolve into your Ravemon when it's destroyed, you'll probably swing the turn back over into your favor, and when your Ravemon's destroyed, you activate the Analog Youth, and then you can basically start raising up another Digimon and raising immediately before the turn ends. The second Tamer for the deck is going to be the new BT13 Keenan Krier. Now this guy, 3 copies of him in the deck on play. You can make your opponent trash either an option or a Tamer card, and if they don't, then you gain a memory and you draw a card, which essentially makes this guy a 2-cost Tamer. And then additionally, you're going to gain a little bit of memory whenever your Ravemons come back from the trash. Now our final Tamer for the deck is going to be the Keenan Tamer from EX4. He's a minimum 3 memory Tamer, which means we can make the jump from level 4 to level 6 in a single turn with his effect active. And then also he's going to allow you to gain card draw as well as memory whenever you destroy one of your bird-type Digimon or your Ravemon. The biggest thing here is the fact that he just gives you the memory. The card draw and the extra memory is going to be just cherry on top. Again, this is one of the funnest new decks I've played so far in this set, and I hope that you folks have just as much fun with it as well. Before I close up shop for the day, if you folks are fans of competitive play, competitive Digimon play that is, I did videos on all the streamed top 8 matches that happened over here at the Japan Nationals for Digimon, so definitely check those out on the channel. Additionally, like I said at the beginning of the video, I changed up a couple of things in the deck profile video for today. Let me know if you like that or not in the comments below. Again, I'm taking all suggestions. I want to make these videos as useful for you guys as possible. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. My throat is killing me. Before you guys get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.